History is filled with real horror stories that help shape our world as we know it today. And although many of these events are well known and fully documented, there are some true stories that remain unsolved or still defy belief to this day. Number 5. On the 20th of September, 1961, Barney and Betty Hill were driving down a rural road in New Hampshire's White Mountains. The couple had decided to take a spontaneous road trip through Montreal and Niagara Falls, as Barney had been working long shifts at the post office. Betty had been working hard on state child welfare cases, and Barney felt that they needed a break. They had been married for 16 months, but never had a honeymoon, and so saw this as the perfect opportunity to celebrate their marriage. On the last night of their trip, they left Vermont at around 10 p.m. and headed back to Portsmouth, expecting to reach their house between 2 and 3 a.m. As they drove on, they became aware of a strange light that seemed to be following them. At first, Barney assured Betty that it was probably a satellite that had gone off course, but they soon realized that it was following their path, and they pulled over to investigate. Through a pair of binoculars, Betty noticed that it wasn't merely a light following them, but an object that was spinning in the air. 70 miles into their home journey, Barney suddenly pulled over and got out of the car, keeping the engine running. He put his firearm in his pocket and walked out into a nearby field, binoculars in hand, and would later describe what he saw as an object as big as a jet, but as round and flat as a pancake. He noticed that the object had windows, and that uniformed beings were looking out at him. He tried to reach for his weapon, but couldn't, and a voice told him to put down his binoculars. He ran back to the car and sped off, while Betty tracked the object. But soon, they both became drowsy and lost consciousness. When they came to, they were 35 miles down the road, and 2 hours had inexplicably passed. Following the incident, Betty would have upsetting dreams, and Barney started to suffer from anxiety. When they contacted a psychiatrist, Benjamin Simon, they decided to try hypnosis to possibly recover their memories from that night. Under hypnosis, they described being taken by extraterrestrial beings into the craft before being separated and examined in an oval room. The beings took hair, skin, and clothing samples, and they were probed with needles. They were then returned to their vehicle, where they awoke 2 hours later and became a part of a truly creepy historical mystery. Number 4. Karinga is a tiny village on India's east coast near the Bay of Bengal and the Godavari River, but in its prime, it was a bustling port city with a population of hundreds of thousands of people and a harbor that received thousands of ships every year. The city's decline was caused by a set of scary historical events that occurred 50 years apart and changed the area forever. In December of 1789, during cyclone season, a storm developed in the area, and witnesses would describe a series of 3 massive waves that crashed ashore. The first was big enough to drive all the ships anchored in the harbor ashore, followed by 2 even larger waves that flowed inland, causing the fertile fields of Godavari Delta to be flooded with salt water from the ocean. The destruction was so widespread that upwards of 20,000 people lost their lives, and the storm became known as the Great Karinga Cyclone. The remaining inhabitants were able to overcome the damage and rebuild their lives, the city becoming more populous and prosperous than before. But 50 years later, in 1839, an even bigger catastrophe would hit the area. On the 25th of November, a massive cyclone struck once again, creating swells of over 40 feet that dwarfed the waves from the first disaster. Every last ship in the harbor was destroyed, their wreckages found miles inland, and the city was decimated with over 300,000 people losing their lives. The damage was so great and complete that the remaining survivors made no attempt to rebuild the city and moved inland, away from a city that was now considered to be cursed, and so the original city of Karinga was lost forever. Number 3. "19-year-old Jenny Lochae became a part of creepy history on the 11th of September 1977. She was known as a very bright woman who regularly made the dean's list while studying at the San Francisco State University. At around 6 p.m. that night, Jenny told her roommate that she was going to the library to get some work done in one of the study rooms. The basement level of the library stayed open late, with the study rooms only being locked at 11 p.m. No one that was in the building that night remembered seeing her, and the following morning, her roommate realized that she hadn't come home. At the library, a psychology professor walked into a faculty reading room and discovered Jenny deceased. She had been attacked with a blade and a standing ashtray, and her belongings were placed in a neat pile close by. Upon investigation, it was found that 400 people had keys to the room where Jenny was found, and when students and faculty were questioned, no one had any information. Her friends stated that she was well-liked and didn't have any enemies. She hadn't been acting out of character, and over time, the case grew cold. Despite the best efforts of investigators, Jenny's case remains unsolved today, and no suspects were ever found. Theories have been posited that her death may have been the work of the Zodiac Killer, but their confirmed victims all had their lives taken during the 60s, and this seems unlikely to be the case. It's also been suggested that Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer, was responsible, but his modus operandi doesn't fit with Jenny's case. Another suspect that has been suggested is a campus security guard who was on duty that night. The following day, he called in sick, and many people believe that he was lying low after committing the heinous crime. Since he was a person of authority, it's very plausible that Jenny would have trusted him and would have followed him into the room if he asked her to, making it easy for him to end her life. Whatever the case may be, it's been nearly 45 years since Jenny lost her life, and to date, her case remains a mystery. Number 2. In 1880, Urban Napoleon Stanger and his wife, Elizabeth, immigrated from Germany and opened a successful bakery in Whitechapel, London. Two friends of theirs, Christian Zengler and Franz Felix Stamm, had joined the couple to work in the bakery, and before long, rumors suggested that Elizabeth and Franz were having an affair. On the 12th of November, Zengler noticed Stanger standing outside the bakery with Stamm and two other men, and it would be the last time he ever saw him. The next day, Elizabeth told customers that Stanger had gone back to Germany on urgent business, and they noted that she didn't seem to miss him very much. People then started to notice that Stamm and Elizabeth would frequently walk arm in arm, and soon Stamm had moved in with her. Elizabeth seemed to be of the mind that her husband wouldn't be returning, and the bakery sign was soon changed from UN Stanger to FF Stamm. In April of 1882, a notice was released asking for information on the whereabouts of Stanger, noting that he had mysteriously disappeared in November. Then, in October of that year, Elizabeth was arrested and charged with fraud and robbery, as there was a stipulation in Stanger's will that she was to inherit all of his belongings as long as she didn't remarry. Though she and Stamm hadn't married, their affair was still seen as a violation of the will, and Stamm was also arrested. At her trial, Elizabeth claimed to have no idea where her husband was, and that he had left their house after they had an argument and never came back, contrary to what she had told her customers. She added that Stum was merely a good friend who was helping her mourn her husband, as she missed him dearly and all charges against her were dropped. Stum, however, was found guilty of fraud and forgery charges relating to the bakery's change of ownership, and he was sentenced to 10 years of hard labor. When Elizabeth returned to the bakery, she was not welcomed by the Whitechapel community, who regularly hissed at her when passing her on the street. Many people believed that she and Stum had conspired to have Stanger done away with, and had planned to live happily while running the bakery. No other suspects were ever named. Stanger was never found, and the case remains unsolved, cementing Stanger's name in creepy history forever. Number 1. A creepy historical event that took place in Shag Harbor, at the southern tip of Nova Scotia in 1967, would literally put the small fishing village on the map, since previously it had been left off of most maps. On the 4th of October, residents of the village started noticing 4 orange lights in the sky. 5 teenagers who were watching the event later stated that they saw the lights flash in a sequence before suddenly diving at a 45-degree angle towards the surface of the water. They expected the lights to crash into the water, but instead they seemed to hover just above the surface, about a half-mile from the shore. Other witnesses thought that they were watching a tragic plane crash, and reported the lights to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at Barrington Passage. RCMP Constable Ron Pound had coincidentally already seen the lights and was driving towards the harbor on Highway 3. He later stated that he saw 4 lights that seemed to be attached to a single craft that he estimated to be about 60 feet in length. He eventually made it to the shore along with Police Corporal Victor Werbecki and Constable Ron O'Brien, and they saw a yellow light moving along the water, leaving a yellow foamy wake behind it. The Coast Guard and other boats raced to the scene, but by the time they had arrived, the light had disappeared. However, the foam was still visible, and it was assumed that whatever it was had submerged beneath the water. The HMS Granby traveled to the area, and divers searched the sea floor for several days, but nothing was found and the incident was all but forgotten. But when Mutual UFO Network investigator Chris Stiles started investigating the incident, he was told by some of the divers that the object had in fact entered the water and left the area. It then traveled approximately 25 miles to Government Point, which is located near a submarine detection base, where it was spotted on sonar. Naval vessels were brought to the area, planning salvage operations, but a second UFO arrived, presumably to aid the first. The Navy decided to keep an eye on the objects, but after nearly a week, some of the fleet was called away to investigate reports of a Russian submarine that had entered Canadian waters. At this point, both objects traveled to the Gulf of Maine, broke the water's surface, and disappeared into the sky, never to be seen again. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.